Okay, so it turns out you can then get fancier about this and use something called matching. Basically, this is what you say. You say, you know, you're not doing an apples-to-apples comparison because you're, and let me do the same for protected areas, the same exact thing. If you say, what does a protected area do, and you look at the average deforestation in the country, that's actually not an apples-to-apples comparison. Why? Protected areas and these payments are not on average places. They're on stinky for agriculture places, right? So if you want to know what the program did, compare apples to apples. Go find places that are like the places that get the policy and compare to those. Very simple. That's matching. Okay, once you get into that, what does the word similar mean? Well, it could mean anything, right? So it turns out there's a few ways people tend to define it: propensity score matching, covariate matching. That's fine. Anyone could get into this, easily done in undergrad class. Very straightforward. I would stress the only thing that there is no truth here. There's about 5,000 choices you have to make about how to compare the data. If you don't get robustness over about 4,800 of those, you probably don't have a story, but I guarantee you the story is robust to those here, okay? So anyway, a lot of choices just to make an apples-to-apples comparison, which is the same statement we made earlier, compared to the baseline. What would have happened in the kind of places that you put the policy? That's the similarity, and compare to that. So what do we find? We run it a bunch of ways. Oh, finally. This also brings you to being serious about how similar are these places. This just shows you, who knows what this is, right? But right here, all these yellow lines at the 0, yellow dots, that basically tells you, one, I've done that procedure. For the kind of places that were not that likely to be in the program, I'm doing a pretty good job matching. I have pretty much the same characteristics inside and outside in my apples to apples. But now that I've taken this seriously, I notice that for the places that were super bad for agriculture and very likely to be in the program, I haven't found any good matches. So I might want to back off on using those places in my comparison. So it's just being very serious about a very simple idea of apples-to-apples comparisons, okay? So what do you find? You can do this a bunch of ways, blah, blah. The key thing is, there's the 1/5 of 1%. Again, that's low, but that's not the point. The question is, when you correct for the policy design bias, do you find a lower impact? You do, you do, you do, you do, you do, you do, you do. By the way, the only one that we actually have the really well-defined standard errors is the lowest one. So maybe I'll say we tend to think we cut it in half, or even probably the most defensible number, if I had to choose one, is down at the bottom, and that shows no statistically significant effect at all. This can't be that shocking, by the way, right? Remember, there wasn't a lot of deforestation to block, and volunteering dominated. So at the very least, we want to say from here, it's just not true. No matter what you do, creating a payments program, you have impact. Some of that is idiosyncratic because Costa Rica did all this other stuff, but some of it, which is why I'm going to go on and show you a second period, is about policy design. How much time have I used? 2 more minutes. Oh, gosh, okay. Then I'm going to jump to this. Okay. So you do this for 2000, 2005. What happened post-2000? The World Bank Ecomercados loan is renewed, and people decide they're going to target. So that's an interesting word, because it turns out target for me would mean aim at places where you're really going to change land use. Target for a conservation biologist or ecologist might mean target a place that you really want to save if you actually had any impact, like a nice ecosystem or your favorite bird or some downstream thing for the city. So what happened was the latter. More ecological targeting, top-down targeting of goals that you have for eco-benefits. Good idea. By the way, this is now an integrated story, right? We're using sort of the ecology as well as whatever else we're using for incentives that Gautam mentioned. So what happened? More impact. Why? The top-down targeting wiped out the effect of the volunteering in. No longer did the volunteering story bias us because we were aiming from the top down at these eco-benefits. We're talking really low impacts here, but the second period impacts are 4 times as high as the first. Multiples of 4 are serious, right? When they go from tiny to tiny, it's almost pointless. It looks bad. But what Costa Rica is offering is they did a policy, they changed the policy, they didn't even think about targeting impact, but by mistake, they took away and they changed the policy design, and we can see that in aiming the thing more randomly at places where you can block deforestation, they multiply the impact of the thing upward by quite a bit. Let me just say, and I'm running out of time, so I've given this a little bit short shrift. I just want to say 2 quick things. One, yes, stick to your results when you do this, and this is as much for students as anyone. Stick to your results, but also think about framing. When I put this stuff out there, people didn't like it, right? Because they say, you don't like my program, you're threatening my income, I want to run one of these things. I love ecosystem service payments. I'm an environmental economist. They come right out of the textbook. right? So they make a lot of sense. And I stuck with it. And by the way, some of the same people now want me to defend their numbers. You know why? Because they want to sell avoided deforestation to a carbon market. Carbon markets with lawyers and contracts who are very skeptical, more skeptical than probably this audience, which wants it to work. So do I, right? So that market is essentially saying, you know what, forget it. I can't deal with this baseline thing. It's a mess. I don't know what I'm getting. Cancel the whole thing, right? I'm at a leading conference the other day. One of the leading climate change economists trying to design the system says, none of this developing country stuff. So all of a sudden, the people who are a little bit mad that I said only half is the impact of what you're getting asked me to come out and make a presentation on Amazon protected areas and defend a third, right? A rigorous defense of a third is a good defense, and it says that there is something here. You can do something. So stick to the numbers. They are what they are, right? And then the policy swings back and forth. On the other hand, maybe I should say things a little bit differently, right? And it turns out, I thought to myself, you know what? People who don't like your policy doesn't do what you think it does, of course, right? But what about the same exact analysis says that if you went here, you'll definitely have low impact, and if you went here, you'll have high impact. It's exactly the same analysis rewritten as forward-looking guidance to say, you know what, you have fixed dollars, you probably want to have the most impact you can. What I'm really saying here is you're awesome, and if you go this way, you're going to do better. That goes over much better, right? So, you know, even an economist can learn. Amazing. Finally, let me just say on integration, interdisciplinary, what I just said is missing a lot of things. It's right for what it is. Let me just give you a small example of political economy that I skipped over. Nobody says this, by the way. I think it's probably the story of the Costa Rican program. I believe, according to talking to various ex-ministers of environment in Costa Rica, that it would have been hard to pass the 1997 restriction on land use if you hadn't also created this payments program. It's basically a compensation for illegal takings of land use rights. Thus, in aggregate, it probably did have significantly more impact. And then you have to teach the student, what did that regression actually say? Did it say creating the program had no impact? No. What it specifically technically said was the spatial distribution of where the payments went is not correlated with deforestation. Totally different from if when you created the compensation you could pass a law, you had a bigger impact. Different disciplinary perspective, probably pretty important in thinking about it. And by the way, most countries in the world can't pass that takings. So they wouldn't be running around saying, oh, we'll just do that, because you know what? We can't do that. We can't take away those rights. That's not the situation we're in. Second, all this stuff, I've skipped all the eco details. And I promise Neha, for instance, is working on groundwater extraction. I am convinced that she'll make a serious contribution by taking the physics of underground water flow seriously in terms of when I pull the water, does it affect you? Some of the same things here. Everything I told you was right, but you need to know the spatial interactions and meta-habitat and the SLOS debate in ecology and all this stuff in order to get the right investments, even if you take what I'm saying to be true. I don't have time, but if you look at the protected area literature, it's exactly like this. Only think species, a couple decades later, think about costs, and a couple decades later, the things I'm saying about threat, right? Integrated discussion is not usually the first thing coming out of academics. It's much more, my thing explains everything, right? So the interdisciplinary, the policy story really shows you need them all. Finally, for the student, I think at the undergrad level, do get a sense of all of them. As you go forward, I happen to think you want to be really good at least one of these. But then you keep your ears open, you represent one, you state things in basic, simple English, and people tend to get it. And then get ready to learn from your colleagues, because I found the best way to learn is to have an expert explain. It's much better than me having to take the class. You really want to absorb all these, and sorry for going over time.